Welcome to FM's Next Gen, a podcast from Building, Operating, and Management Magazine and FacilitiesNet, where we talk about what's coming next in facilities from the perspective of young facility managers working in the industry today. I'm your host, Naomi Mijan, Senior Editor of Building, Operating Management. This is Episode 2 of FM's Next Gen, featuring AnJuan Thomas, Building Management Specialist in the Office of Facilities and Administrative Services at the U.S. Department of the Interior. We first met at NFMT in Baltimore and are connecting here on a video chat. Welcome to the podcast. And if you could just start with, telling us your name, your title, where you work.
All right. My name is AnJuan Thomas. I am a building management specialist at the U.S. Department of the Interior in Washington, D.C. So basically what I do, I'm part of the building management team that oversees maintenance and operations of the Stuart Lee Udall Department of the Interior building, which is the main headquarters for the U.S. Department of the Interior.
Tell me the story of how you got to this job.
Getting to this job is actually the culmination of my career in facilities management to this point. It all started for me back in 2003 when I enlisted into the U.S. Air Force. My job in the Air Force was as a civil engineering operations manager, and where I oversaw civil engineering projects from start to finish, work schedules, labor, and pretty much making sure that the budget for all of the various building projects that we had on any military installation were good to go. From there, after I transitioned from the Air Force in 2013, after 10 years, I went to the Army Corps of Engineers, where I was a facility operations specialist for about 20 facilities in Alabama, Florida, and Georgia. And, from there, I decided to make the step up to the big leagues, so to speak, to the Department of the Interior. That's where I am now. So I've been here for about 3 years. Okay, excellent. So you and I first met at NFMT in Baltimore, and I don't know if you were a part of this conversation. There was a breakfast on Wednesday about the Pro FM program, and were you at that breakfast? I don't remember. No, I was not at the breakfast, but I'm vaguely familiar with the Pro FM.
Sure.
program.
For those who don't know, it's a certification that's fairly new in the field. But one of the conversations they were talking about kind of continuity planning and also the, getting people into the industry. But one specific question that came up was establishing that pipeline between like the Air Force and into facilities, because there's a lot of affinity there between those two things. How do you feel that pipeline, I guess, was that kind of a smooth process for you going from one position to the next, or was it murky finding, what the next step would be for you?
So, as you mentioned, there is a big pipeline. I guess the right way to say it is the pipeline is there from military to, regular FM. It's on the military side of things, it's different types of facility management because it's defense, and defense is different. And so there's in the career field that I came from in the Air Force, everyone technically could be considered a facility manager who worked in my career field as civil engineering operations managers. It just depends on, if you wanted to expand on your knowledge of facilities. The administrative and the operations side of it from the start, you're kind of ingrained in that. I would say that the challenge is on the department, on the DoD side of things, Department of Defense side of things. You don't get as much education into the intricacies of facilities management, and that was a challenge for me coming in. On it operationally, I was pretty sound. And my employers at USACE and here at DOI, they noticed that from the start. On the mechanical side of things, knowing about HVAC, electricity, or, knowing things about structural integrity of facilities, that's a little bit more challenging. You have to be I think, coming from the military side of things, I think it would take a go-getter to really strive after learning about the mechanical aspect of facilities management to be successful. For me personally, that was my goal. That was one of my first goals, is to get better on the mechanical side of things, to become a whole facilities manager, so to speak.
How did you go about achieving that goal? Did you go back to school, or what?
So the first thing that I did was I joined IFMA, the International Facilities Management Association, which is one of the big three professional organizations, I think, along with BOM and BOMI, I think. So getting the credentials, one of the credentials as a facility management professional, that allowed me to get some education as to the competencies of facility management, but I also pursued higher education. I did the 2-year program at the Rochester Institute of Technology, where I got my master's in facility management, and my concentration there was learning more about the mechanical side of things, about facilities management. But even more than the formal education piece, of course, experience plays a major role in it. So in my positions, whether it was in my civilian positions, whether it was with the United States Corps of Engineers or here at the Department of the Interior, getting away from my desk, going out with the craftsmen, with the technicians, learning more about each individual trade, or becoming intimately familiar with the certain aspects of the building, have helped my knowledge of the mechanical aspect of things. Mm-hmm. So I think that's the way to go for a lot of facility managers, especially those transitioning from the military side of things, where it's much more of an administrative approach towards facility management as opposed to a whole person mechanical side of it.
Mm. As far as your team, are they all primarily military, and have they all also have they gone for their masters in facilities, for example, or are you kind of an outlier?
So on my team here at DOI, I guess I could say I'm somewhat of an outlier. I was one of the veterans preference hires here. Perhaps mostly because of my military background is probably why I was brought on. With all of the different background things with military, customs, the courtesies, the timeliness, the attention to detail and things like that. I'm pretty sure that all of those factored in my interviews. So we have a team of government civilians who handle like the operations and administrative parts of the facility management of our building. And then we have a contracted maintenance team that performs, all of the repairs and things of that nature. I would probably say of everyone involved with the management of the building, I think it's maybe 2 or 3 of us who have prior military service.
What do you think of it? I mean, it seems like you've been kind of in or around facilities for most of your professional career. What are you thinking of it?
So I'm 34 years old. So by facility management standards, I'm young. But in my experience, I'm older. I've been doing this type of work since I'm 19 years old, and I love it. Actually, it's a career specialty where you have to have thick skin because your primary focus is to fix problems. Nobody likes it when their facility isn't functioning properly. Whether it's the HVAC, it's too hot, too cold, or water problems, electricity problems. You have to have a heart to attack those types of things, and having that prior service in the military, I love serving. Whether it's serving my country, serving my community, in this case serving the tenants and the users and the visitors to my facility. I enjoy that aspect of it, which is why I don't look at it as a job. I look at it more as a passion. my passion is for facility management, and it is for making sure that the quality of life in the buildings that I manage is as good as it can get.
Those things that you've said, having a heart to attack those problems, that's such a great phrase. And the passion and the focus on the quality of life, there's been some discussion in the industry as to whether the phrase facility manager is going to be going away. I don't know if it ever actually would go away, but be replaced by experience manager, because it is the facilities, but you're creating the environment, the work environment for everyone that's in that space.
That's it. That's interesting. I've never heard of that experience manager. I can't even fathom having, going into meetings. Hey, yes, I'm the experience manager. I mean, at the heart of it, I would hope that it would not move towards that title. I think, facilities manager, building manager, I think it's the appropriate title because, it really entails what you're managing. You're managing a building or you're managing a portfolio of facilities. It's a broad concept, but at the heart of it, this is what we do professionally.
Yeah. You have to love buildings.
Yes,
I think.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So what have been your biggest successes or things that you've been most proud of achieving to this point in your career?
Of course, I have the two parts to my career. I have the military portion of it, which was the first 10 years of my career, and then the civilian portion of it, which has been for the past now 6 years. On the military side of things, facility management, it's not a really enforced concept in the military sector. It's just kind of okay, we have facilities. If something goes wrong, let's just call somebody and hope for the best. For me, my biggest success during my military career was establishing an actual facility management program for an entire military base. When I was the facility management coordinator, I was in charge of training all the other facility managers on the base, and it was a big project. There was very little guidance locally on how to do it. It was kind of like all the other facility managers on the base we were kind of like out there in the wilderness. So I worked with environmentalists, security forces personnel, different craft shops, whether it's HVAC, electricians, plumbers, carpenters, heavy equipment operators, roads maintenance personnel. I worked with them all to create a handbook, a very comprehensive handbook, just to give all of the remaining facility managers or the other facility managers on the base that tool that they can use so they can properly manage their facilities. Because, at the heart of things, facilities, when you look at the amount of money that's invested into buildings, especially in the public sector, whether it's, your local government, state governments, or even federal levels, it's a lot of money that goes into those buildings, and you want to make sure that you're doing everything to protect, the investment of the taxpayer. So for me, that was my biggest success in the Air Force. On the civilian side of things, I think my biggest success, I don't know if I've achieved it yet. I think that every day, I'll get emails or I'll see customer feedbacks of, hey, thanks for, making sure my air is at a certain temperature. Those are the things I consider success here on the civilian side, where it's, less structured. If I could make sure that a tenant's temperature is at 74 degrees on a 100-degree day, that's a success for me.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. Now, I want to backtrack just a little bit and unpack that handbook and the Air Force, because, okay, from a complete ignorant civilian perspective, right, I have this perception that the military has it all figured out all the time, that it's all like by the book and there's like everything has like 10 steps and it's all very spelled out. So how is it that 10 years ago or 16 years ago, you're the one coming in and coming up with the way to codify this process. Like, what was going on?
So with facilities management in the Air Force, and I can only speak for the Air Force. I can't really speak for all the other services, the Army, Marines, Navy, and so forth. In the Air Force, you have what we call the civil engineering squadrons. Basically, they were in charge of managing facilities on any military base or managing grounds and things of that sort. Pretty much everything that would be encompassed in the facility management career field. On any military base, Air Force bases specifically, you could have a few dozen buildings, you can have a few hundred buildings. And so obviously, you don't have the personnel to manage all of those buildings simultaneously, so those duties would be delegated to certain people who use those buildings frequently. And those personnel weren't necessarily civil engineers. They weren't trained as I was trained. So the knowledge, so there was a knowledge gap. And that's where my job as an operations manager really took flight, is to fill in that gap. And one of the things that I did, one of the things that most of the operations managers now do, is they govern facility management programs to educate those non-civil engineer personnel on how to properly manage a building, what the specific protocols are, what the guidance is, what's legal, what's not legal, as far as buildings are concerned. So at the particular base that I was at, I think our handbook was maybe 7 pages. And so, how can you govern a building off a 7-page manual? So what I did was I went to all of the subject matter experts on all things facilities management on that base. And then we put together a pretty comprehensive handbook. I think it ended up being around 60 pages. But we covered everything from service contracts to pest control and entomology concerns to environmental concerns to historical aspects of buildings, and, how to go about the work order process. So, and it was I think it was well received. I got great feedback on it. I won an award because of it. So it was a good experience for me.
I love how you're just.
I feel like I left something, at least a legacy point.
Right. No, that's awesome. I love how you're being so you're downplaying it. It's like, I won an award. I mean, that's huge. That's really amazing. So congratulations. And I'm sure your impact is being felt to this day, because at the very least, it's somewhere to build from. So
yeah,
that's fantastic.
Absolutely.
So that's a great success. So challenges in facilities management happen, pretty constantly, but have there been any kind of notable challenges or anything that you want to speak to that you've had to overcome to this point in your career?
Well, again, speaking to, my military side of things, here, the difference between the military side and the civilian side of things. Here at the Department of the Interior, we have a pretty robust budget as far as, facility management goes. So I really don't encounter too many issues as far as trying to get specific things done or trying to procure certain materials to get the work done. That I can't necessarily say that was the case in my experience in the DOD, whether it was my time in the Air Force or my civilian time in the Corps of Engineers. Because Congress tightly monitors the money as far as, the defense side of things, it can be very hard, very challenging in getting simple projects done or simple work done. I remember one of my most frustrating moments in my career with the Corps of Engineers was just simply trying to get a one-time pest service done in one of my buildings. It's a simple job, maybe a couple $100, maybe at the most. Having to go and get 3 estimates and then wait for approvals, which could take months, just for maybe an hour-long job. Those were the things that frustrated me. So I think, getting through the red tape as far as, getting the actual work done on the military side and on the defense side was probably the most challenging aspect of the job.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, I can imagine. And especially with a pest situation, you're like, time is of the essence. Wow.
Precisely.
Okay, so you've had a interesting and engaging career up to this point. If a young person, in high school or college right now is listening to you and they're wondering, I want to know more about this thing called facilities management. Maybe this is a good fit for me. What do you think they should be doing? What should they be thinking about? How should they be beginning to explore this as an option for themselves?
So I think for the younger people who may be considering this career field as, their future, I think first and foremost, you have to really examine yourself if you have a heart to serve. Because if you don't have a heart to serve, then this isn't the career field for you. I often tell my coworkers and even my friends that it's a thankless career. We only get the recognition when things go wrong. That's really when they really recognize who we are. Is when things go wrong. So you have to have a heart to serve, first and foremost. I think you have to love buildings. You have to love the nooks and crannies of buildings, how an HVAC system works, what makes that light bulb turn on. You have to love certain aspects of the job, from from sitting in meetings on selecting the right types of carpet tiles to sitting with higher ups, getting their vision on what they want for their offices. So it's a unique job in that I think a mentor of mine once said, facilities management, it's not the sexy work, it's the necessary work. And I take that to heart. This isn't a flashy job. I'm probably not going to, be on the cover of Time magazine being a facility manager, but it's a necessary job.
Yeah, it is not a sexy job, but if all the facility managers decided to not show up to work, like, things are gonna not work very well that day.
Yeah, and that's precisely why I say it's a necessary job. If we went on strike, it would be a catastrophe. So you have to, as a young person, you have to realize that it could be a high pressure job. Mm-hmm. So you have to work well under pressure. You have to really expect the unexpected. Every day I come to work not knowing what problems that the building is going to give me. I can prepare for it as much as I can. We could lay out preventive maintenance programs to make sure that, we kind of get an estimate of when things may fail, but we never know what the day will give us. And as a young person, particularly in today's society, where the element of surprise is really shrinking. It's much more of a structured society today where people expect, where the expectation is actually, you already know what it is for the most part. And that's not the case in facilities management. We never know what the problem of the day will be. So as a young person, the most important thing, of course, as I said, having a heart to serve, but absolutely expecting the unexpected and being flexible enough to deal with that is a very key element to the job.
Yeah. And I've also been, have come to learn over the years that people in facilities tend to characterize themselves as kind of adrenaline junkies, that they like For a lot of the field, they like that challenge that, like, I never know what I'm walking into. I have a general idea, but anything could happen. And they like that. That has its pros and cons. So one thing that I've been wondering is, so facilities management is characterized as a field that has a lot of people who've been in it for many, many decades. So a lot of people are getting ready to retire, and there's kind of a changing of the guard happening with folks had delayed their retirement during the most recent recession. Now they're kind of in a position where they can finally retire. So there's this concern and this conversation in the industry about who's coming in, who's going to be filling the jobs. And of course, that's going to be a lot of young people coming in to fill those positions, backfill, and all that stuff. So how do you think that this influx of young people coming into the field is going to influence facilities management?
So that's a very interesting question. A few years back, when I was one of the IFMA scholarship awardees from the IFMA Foundation, the speaker at the presentation, he gave some very interesting statistics. He said that 50%, and this was back in 2015, he said that 50% of the workforce in facilities management would be retiring in the next 5 years, but only 5% of the career field was under the age of 35. So you got 50% retiring, 5% under 35. That tells me we're in an old career field, maybe older than the attorney career field, which, itself could be considered one of the older career fields. I think that the influx of young people that are going to be coming into facilities management, I think that it's going to shape, obviously it's going to shape the future of the career field, how we look at facilities, as opposed to, the legacy days where, work order systems were done with pen and paper, or even, Microsoft Excel spreadsheets and Access databases. Now we've moved to, comprehensive maintenance management systems. And, now we have social media. Who knows, maybe in a year or two, I may be learning about facilities issues in my own building via Twitter. Who knows? But I think that with the influx of young people, you bring in their technology savviness. And I think that will change facilities. It may make it more efficient. It may not make it more efficient. I guess it depends really on the receptiveness of the existing facility managers. I mean, I'd like to think that most facility managers are creatures of habit, especially when you've managed a specific building for a long time. You're kind of stuck and you kind of get stuck in your ways because it works for you, a certain way, with any generational change, as we've seen through history, from Generation X to baby boomers, now to the millennials. There's always been mass changes and significant change in which the generation before didn't necessarily adjust easily. But I don't think it will be a bad thing with the newbies coming on, and I like to call them newbies, even though I'm amongst them, so to speak. But when the newbies come along, I think it will be a great thing for the career field. I think they'll bring energy into the career field, fresh ideas. I think they'll challenge us to look at facilities from a different perspective. Maybe we'll move away from the old suit and tie look for a lot of facility managers. Maybe, just walk around polo shirts and, iced lattes, handling facility management. I look forward to it. I somewhat feel like I'm in the middle of it. Being young in age, so to speak, against the average of the facility managers, but having, almost 16 years of experience puts me in a different bracket than your normal young facility manager. So I'm looking forward to it. I'm embracing the change that's coming forward, and if there's anything that I can do to help the younger facility managers with my experience, my youthfulness, I think that I would be able to relate to them, being somewhat closer in age.
You're perfectly positioned to just go right to the top now, because you've done all of the work to lead up to that. So you're in a good. Well, I shouldn't jinx anything, but you're in a good spot.
That's the scary thing about it, because now you're getting an era of facility managers some of them are the legends of the career field. I've read books about them. I've seen them speak at conferences. Those guys are retiring and moving on to the next phases of their lives. And so you have, people like me who probably be moving up and, maybe getting more visibility. And for me, I don't do this for the visibility or for the spotlight. But knowing that one day I could just be in that position just by, being proficient at my job, going my day to day, it could be somewhat scary, but, I have to embrace that challenge as well, knowing that I could be a future leader of the career field.
Definitely. So what is the future what do you see for yourself in the future? Do you foresee staying with your, more along the government sector, or are there other sectors that you might want to explore, or?
So for me, and it goes back to saying that I have that heart for service. I've served the nation, whether it's as a military service member or a government civilian, for almost half my life, since 2003, continuously. I enjoy, being a federal employee. I know that you probably wouldn't hear that a lot, with the differences between the government and the private sector. I enjoy working for the government. I know that there are great opportunities out there on the private sector side, and maybe one day I'll entertain those opportunities. But for now, I think I'm fairly content on the government side, and I think mainly because on the public sector side, especially at the federal level, the concept of facilities management, it's not as robust as it is on the private sector. So I'm hoping that I could be one of the facility managers that champions change on the government side of things, and just brings it into the loop, to be on par with what we see on the private sector side of it. The dream changes every day for some people. For me, I'm a facility manager lifer. I'd like to consider myself a facility manager lifer. So maybe I may have another 30 years left in me. Hopefully more. But for now, I think I'm pretty content on the government side of things. So just speaking to the young people who may be looking at facilities management, or even, people who are not so young who may be looking at facilities management, it's a career field where there's job security here. There'll always be buildings. They'll always need people who are going to manage the buildings. So just come give it a try. You may like the challenge that it brings every day, and not knowing what you're going to face. You may like the reward you get, the personal reward, the personal feelings that you get from, being able to resolve a customer issue, and improving the quality of life for their experience in your building. So I think it's a great career field to be a part of. And, as I said, anything that I could do to help advance the career field, I'm all for it.
That's fantastic. Well, I really thank you so much for making the time to speak with me and for getting this message out there. This has been really, really great.
It's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much for listening to episode 2 of FM's Next Gen, featuring AnJuan Thomas, Building Management Specialist in the Office of Facilities and Administrative Services at the U.S. Department of Interior. What did you think? Were there any questions I forgot to ask? Let me know in the comments below or send me an email at naomi.mijan@tradepress.com. Be sure to tune in next week for the next episode of FM's Next Gen, and in the meantime, find everything you could ever want to know about facilities management at FacilitiesNet, the online home of Building Operating Management and Facility Maintenance Decisions magazines. I've been your host, Naomi Mijan, Senior Editor of Building Operating Management.